Strangers in the restroom turned away in disgust, smelling the damp clothes I'd been sleeping in inside my car for weeks. I stood at the mirror, smoothing out my only clean shirt for an interview, while Murphy waited in the parking lot. His medication had run out 3 days ago. Before we continue and find out how it all began, please subscribe and leave a like. We truly love to read your comments below. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my light days, the ones where I caught up on paperwork and returned calls I'd missed during field visits. The envelope was standard government issue, thin and official, with the state seal embossed in the corner. I opened it standing at my kitchen counter, still wearing my work clothes, while Murphy nosed at his empty food bowl behind me. Effective immediately, your employment with the Department of Child and Family Services is terminated due to violation of protocol in Case File 2024 CW 7843. You have 30 days to appeal this decision through the Employee Relations Division. Your final paycheck and benefits information will be mailed separately. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. Case 2024 CW 7843. The Harrison family. I'd closed that case 6 months ago after the mother completed her parenting classes and the home visits showed steady improvement. My supervisor, Rachel Chun, had signed off on every decision. I'd followed protocol exactly. Murphy's bowl clattered against the tile floor. He was 12 now, a golden retriever mixed with cloudy eyes and arthritis in his back legs. The vet bills had been climbing steadily. Last month's visit cost $400 for medication and blood work. I put it on my credit card. I set the letter down and filled Murphy's bowl with the prescription kibble that cost twice what regular food did. He ate slowly, his tail wagging in that patient way old dogs have. I watched him and tried to calculate how long my savings would last. 3 months, maybe 4 if I was careful. The rent on this place was $1,500 a month. Murphy's medication was another $200. Car insurance, utilities, groceries. The next morning I called the Employee Relations Division. A woman named Brenda answered after 6 rings. Her voice had that careful neutrality of someone who dealt with angry people all day. I need to understand the grounds for my termination, I said. Case 2024 CW 7843 was closed with supervisor approval. I have documentation. Your appeal needs to be submitted in writing within 30 days, she said. Include all relevant documentation and a detailed explanation of your position. The review board meets quarterly. The next session is in 3 months. 3 months? I was terminated immediately. How am I supposed to pay my rent for 3 months with no income? You can apply for unemployment benefits, she said. But be aware that terminations for cause may affect eligibility. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I started gathering documents that night. Every email, every case note, every supervisor approval from the Harrison case. I had a system for filing, had always been meticulous about documentation. It was one of the things Rachel used to praise me for. You could testify in court tomorrow with these files, she'd said once. This is exactly how it should be done. I tried calling Rachel's office line the next day. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message asking her to call me back. Kept my voice steady and professional. She didn't call. I drove to the office on Thursday morning. Security stopped me at the front desk, a young guy I'd seen 100 times. He looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, ma'am, but your access has been revoked. I can't let you go up. I just need to speak with Rachel Chun for 5 minutes. She's my former supervisor. I'd need approval from the director's office to allow that, and they're in meetings all morning. He shifted his weight, not meeting my eyes. I can have someone bring down any personal items from your desk if you want. I left before he could see my hands shaking. Murphy was waiting in the car, his head resting on the center console. I'd started bringing him with me places because leaving him alone made me anxious. What if something happened? What if he fell or got sick and I wasn't there? The union representative's office was in a strip mall 20 minutes away, wedged between a tax preparation service and a nail salon. His name was Donald Kirby, and he had the weary look of someone who'd heard every story twice. He listened while I explained the situation, his pen moving occasionally across a yellow legal pad. "Here's the reality," he said when I finished. "The department has broad authority to terminate employees for protocol violations. If they documented this correctly, and it sounds like they did, your best shot is proving the violation either didn't happen or wasn't serious enough to warrant termination." My supervisor approved every decision I made. "Do you have that in writing?" I pulled out my file. Email chains, case notes with Rachel's initials, the final closure report with her digital signature. Donald looked through them carefully, taking his time. When he finished, he set them down and folded his hands. "This is good documentation. But here's what's going to happen. They'll argue that supervisor approval doesn't absolve you of personal responsibility for following protocol. They'll say you should have known better, should have flagged the issue yourself, should have sought additional guidance. That's not reasonable. We're expected to consult with supervisors. That's the whole point of having them. I'm telling you how they'll argue it. Whether it's reasonable is a different question." He leaned back in his chair. "You can file the appeal. I'll help you prepare it. But I want you to understand the timeline and the odds. 3 to 6 months for a decision, assuming they don't delay it. Success rate for these appeals is maybe 30%. What am I supposed to do for 6 months without income? Apply for unemployment. Look for other work in your field. Save everything you can." I spent that weekend updating my resume. 12 years of experience in child welfare, specialized training in trauma-informed care and family systems therapy, a master's degree in social work. It should have been enough to get interviews quickly. I sent applications to 3 other county agencies and 2 nonprofit organizations. The first rejection came back in 4 days. After careful consideration, we've decided to pursue other candidates. The second took a week. The third asked me to come in for an interview. The interviewer was a woman about my age, maybe a little younger, with a kind of aggressive professionalism that made me tired just looking at her. She asked standard questions about my experience, my approach to case management, my philosophy on family preservation versus child safety. I answered carefully, honestly. Then she set down her pen. "I need to ask about your departure from DCFS. I see here you were terminated rather than resigned." I'm currently appealing that termination. It was related to a protocol dispute on a case where I had full supervisor approval for my decisions. But the termination stands as of now. Yes. She made a note. We take protocol very seriously here. Our funding depends on maintaining compliance with state and federal guidelines. I'm sure you understand. I didn't get the job. Neither did I get the next one or the one after that. By the end of the month, I understood that the termination was following me, a red flag that made me too risky to hire. The field was small. People talked. Nobody wanted someone who might bring problems. Murphy's medication ran out on the 15th. The prescription refill was $240. I had $800 left in my checking account and $4,000 in savings that was supposed to be for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency. I paid for the medication and drove home with the radio off, trying to do math that wouldn't work no matter how many times I recalculated it. The unemployment office was crowded. I waited 2 hours to speak with a caseworker, a man who looked barely out of college. He typed my information into his computer with 2 fingers, hunting for each key. "It says here you were terminated for cause," he said. "That's going to complicate things." "I'm appealing the termination. I have documentation that I followed proper protocol." "Right, but until that appeal is decided, the termination stands. And terminations for cause typically disqualify you from benefits. Let me check with my supervisor." He disappeared for 15 minutes. When he came back, he looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, but we can't approve benefits while this is under appeal. If your appeal is successful, you can reapply at that time." I called Donald Kirby from the parking lot. They denied my unemployment claim. That's standard for terminations under appeal. "I'm sorry. There's not much we can do about it until the review board makes a decision." "When is that again?" "Next board meeting is scheduled for late March. So roughly 3 months from now if they don't push it." 3 months. I had maybe 2 months of money if I was extremely careful. Murphy's next vet appointment was in 6 weeks. The student loans I'd been paying down for years didn't care that I'd lost my job. Neither did my landlord. That night I made a list. Expenses I could cut, things I could sell, worst-case scenarios. The list for things I could cut was short. I already lived carefully. I didn't have cable, didn't eat out, bought clothes maybe twice a year. The rent was below market for the area. My car was paid off but 15 years old and starting to make concerning noises. I couldn't sell it because I needed it for job interviews. Murphy slept on the floor next to my bed, his breathing heavy and rhythmic. In the morning I'd walk him, give him his medication, spend the day applying for jobs that wouldn't hire me. In 3 months maybe I'd get a hearing where someone would decide whether I'd been treated fairly. In the meantime I'd watch my savings drain away, and hope nothing broke or went wrong or required money I didn't have. I turned off the light and listened to Murphy breathe. The sound was oddly comforting, a reminder that at least one thing in my life still needed me, still depended on me showing up. I held on to that thought and tried not to think about what happened when the money ran out. The appeal took me 3 weeks to write. I rewrote it 6 times, trying to find the balance between professional and desperate, between factual and defensive. Donald reviewed the final version and suggested cutting 2 paragraphs where my frustration showed through too clearly. "They're looking for someone who takes responsibility while also demonstrating they followed procedure," he said. "Emotion works against you here." I filed it on January 23rd. The confirmation email said I'd receive a response within 10 business days regarding the hearing date. On February 6th, 14 business days later, I got a single-sentence reply. "Your appeal has been received and will be reviewed at the next available board meeting, currently scheduled for March 28th. 2 more months. My savings account showed $2,800. I'd stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. The grocery bill was down to $40 a week, mostly rice, beans, and whatever produce was on sale. I skipped lunch most days. Murphy still got his prescription food and medication. That wasn't negotiable. I spent February applying for jobs outside social work. Retail positions, administrative assistants, anything that might hire quickly. A department store called me in for an interview. The manager was friendly, asked why I wanted to leave my current field. I said I was looking for a change, needed something with more regular hours. She nodded, seemed to accept that. Then she asked for references. "From your most recent employer?" "I'd prefer to use references from earlier positions. I'm in the middle of a transition with my current employer, and would rather not involve them yet." Her expression shifted slightly. We do need at least one reference from your current or most recent supervisor. It's company policy. I gave her Rachel's name and number. I never heard back from the department store. Murphy started limping more noticeably in late February. He'd always had some stiffness in the mornings, but now he was reluctant to go up the 3 steps from the parking lot to our apartment. I carried him up one evening when he stopped halfway, his back legs trembling. He weighed 60 pounds. My arms shook by the time I got him inside. The vet visit I'd scheduled for late February couldn't wait. I moved it up. Dr. Patterson was gentle with Murphy, thorough in her examination. She took x-rays and came back looking serious. His arthritis has progressed significantly. We should consider adjusting his medication, possibly adding a pain management protocol. There are also some degenerative changes in his spine that we'll need to monitor. What does that cost? She pulled up something on her computer. The new medication protocol would run about $350 a month. If we need to add physical therapy sessions, that's another $100 per session, and I'd recommend starting with twice a week. I did the math in my head. $350 plus $800 a month for therapy. $1150 total, more than my rent. Plus food, plus the apartment, plus everything else. My savings would be gone in 6 weeks. Let me think about it, I said. Can we just continue his current medication for now? Dr. Patterson's expression was kind but firm. We can, but I want you to understand that his quality of life is declining. The pain is going to get worse without intervention. I paid for the current prescription refill and left. Murphy struggled getting into the car. I lifted his back legs and settled him on the seat, then sat behind the wheel and stared at the dashboard. The check engine light had come on that morning. I'd been ignoring it, hoping it was something minor that could wait. That night I called my sister in Phoenix. We talked maybe 3 times a year, usually on birthdays and holidays. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. Hey, it's me. Is this a bad time? Just getting dinner started. What's up? I told her about the termination, the appeal, the job search. I kept it factual, didn't mention how scared I was or how the money was running out faster than I'd calculated. She listened without interrupting. That's really rough, she said when I finished. Have you thought about moving somewhere cheaper? Like getting a roommate or something? I have a lease until August. And Murphy. Right, the dog. Look, I'd offer to help, but things are tight here too. Dave's company did layoffs last month, and we're trying to build up our emergency fund. Maybe you could find something temporary just to get by until the appeal goes through? I'm trying. Nobody wants to hire someone who might leave in a few months. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. There was a pause, the sound of pots clanging in the background. I'm sorry. I wish I could do more. Keep me posted on how it goes, okay? We said goodbye and I sat on my couch with Murphy's head in my lap. He looked up at me with those cloudy eyes, trusting and patient. I scratched behind his ears and thought about Dr. Patterson's face when she talked about quality of life. The next morning I got an email from a nonprofit I'd applied to 6 weeks earlier. They wanted to schedule a phone interview. I responded within 5 minutes, suggested 3 different time slots. They picked the earliest one, 2 days away. I prepared like it was a trial, researched the organization, reviewed their mission statement, practiced answers to common interview questions. When the call came, I was ready. The interviewer was the executive director, a woman named Susan Morales. Her questions were thoughtful, specific. She asked about my approach to trauma-informed care, how I handled ethical dilemmas, what my philosophy was on the balance between advocacy and professional boundaries. We talked for 40 minutes. It felt good, like a conversation with someone who understood the work. At the end she said, "I'd like to bring you in for an in-person interview next week. Would Tuesday work?" "Absolutely." "Great. I'll send you the details. And I should mention, we will need to contact your previous employer for a reference as part of our hiring process. Is that going to be a problem?" My stomach dropped. I was terminated from my position at DCFS. I'm currently appealing that termination because I believe it was unjustified. I have extensive documentation of my work and can provide multiple references from earlier in my career. The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt longer. "I appreciate your honesty. Let me discuss this with our board and I'll get back to you about the interview." She didn't get back to me. I sent a follow-up email 3 days later. No response. March arrived cold and wet. The check engine light in my car stayed on. I looked up the symptoms online, tried to diagnose it myself. Could be the oxygen sensor, could be a dozen other things. The cheapest repair estimate I found was $300. I decided to risk it and keep driving. Murphy had a bad night on March 8th. He woke me up at 2 in the morning, whining and unable to get comfortable. His back legs weren't working right. I sat with him on the floor, massaging his spine the way Dr. Patterson had shown me, until he finally settled. In the morning he couldn't stand up without help. I called the vet's office at 8. They squeezed me in at 10. Dr. Patterson examined him carefully, her face growing more concerned. She ran blood work and took more x-rays. "His condition is progressing faster than I'd hoped," she said. "We really need to start that pain management protocol. Without it, he's suffering." "How long can he go on like this?" "Without treatment? Weeks, maybe a month or 2. But his quality of life is severely compromised. He's in pain constantly." "And with treatment?" "We could probably buy him another year, maybe more, with decent quality of life. But I need to be honest with you about the costs. We're looking at roughly $1,000 a month between medication, therapy, and monitoring appointments." I looked down at Murphy. He was lying on the examination table, panting slightly, his tail giving a small wag when he saw me watching him. 12 years. He'd been with me through graduate school, through my first terrible job, through every difficult case and long night and moment of doubt. He'd never asked for anything except food and walks and someone to sleep next to. "Can I have a few days to figure out the finances?" "Of course. But please don't wait too long. He's uncomfortable." The savings account showed $1,900. Rent was due in a week. $1,200, which would leave me $700. Murphy's medication was $350. Food and utilities another $300. That was $50 left. No margin for anything going wrong, and things always went wrong. I drove home slowly, Murphy lying across the back seat. The car made a new noise, a kind of rattling that seemed to come from the engine. I turned up the radio and tried not to hear it. That night I looked at credit card offers. Pre-approved for up to $10,000 at 23% interest. I filled out the application and was approved within minutes. The plastic card wouldn't arrive for 7 to 10 business days, but I could use the account number for purchases immediately. I called Dr. Patterson's office the next morning. "I want to start the pain management protocol for Murphy." "That's great," the receptionist said. "We can get him in tomorrow to begin treatment. Just to confirm, you're aware of the ongoing costs?" "Yes." I charged the first month's treatment to the new credit card. Murphy started his medication that afternoon. Within 2 days he was moving more easily. His tail wagged more often. He made it up the apartment steps on his own, slowly but without stopping. The appeal hearing was scheduled for March 28 at 10 in the morning. Donald Kirby called me a week before to prep. This is fairly straightforward. You'll present your case, they'll ask questions. The department will present their position. The board consists of 3 members, all current or former department employees. They're not your colleagues, but they understand the work. What are my chances? Hard to say. Your documentation is solid. The real question is whether they think the violation, even if it happened, warranted termination or should have been a written warning. That's subjective. So basically, I'm hoping they're feeling generous. I wouldn't put it that way in the hearing, but essentially yes. I spent the week before the hearing reviewing my documentation, practicing my presentation. I borrowed a suit from a former coworker, the only person from DCFS who'd returned my calls. She met me in a parking lot and handed over a garment bag. "I'm sorry about all this," she said. "For what it's worth, a lot of us think it's bullshit." "Then why isn't anyone saying that?" She looked uncomfortable. "You know how it is. They're watching everything now, documenting everything. Nobody wants to be next." The hearing room was smaller than I'd expected. Just a conference table and 6 chairs. The board members sat on one side, Donald and I on the other. A department representative, someone I didn't recognize, sat at the end with a laptop and a stack of files. I presented my case for 20 minutes, walked through the Harrison file, showed the emails with Rachel's approvals, explained my reasoning for each decision. The board members took notes, asked occasional questions. Their faces gave nothing away. Then the department representative spoke. She was calm, organized, methodical. Yes, the supervisor had approved the decisions, but the employee had a responsibility to independently assess protocol compliance. Several red flags in the Harrison case should have prompted additional consultation. The closure was premature. The mother's progress, while positive, didn't meet the minimum threshold for case termination per Department Guidelines Section 4.7.2. I'd read Section 4.7.2 100 times in preparation. It was vague, full of language like reasonable assessment and professional judgment, the kind of language that could be interpreted to support any decision. Ms. Chin's approval doesn't negate your independent professional responsibility, one board member said. What would you have done differently if you'd had the opportunity? It was a trap question. If I said I'd do something differently, I admitted fault. If I said I wouldn't change anything, I looked inflexible. I would have documented my consultation with my supervisor more extensively, I said. Made it clearer in the case notes that we'd specifically discussed the concerns about premature closure and agreed that the mother's progress met the threshold. The board member nodded, wrote something down. The hearing lasted an hour and 40 minutes. At the end, the board chair thanked me for my presentation and said they'd issue a written decision within 15 business days. I walked to my car feeling numb. Donald caught up with me in the parking lot. "You did well in there," he said. "You were professional, well prepared. The documentation helped. But I can't predict which way they'll go. It could be anywhere from full reinstatement to complete denial of your appeal. And if they deny it, then you'd need to decide whether to pursue legal action, which would mean hiring an attorney and probably a year or more of litigation, or you move on and try to rebuild somewhere else." I drove home and found Murphy waiting by the door, his tail wagging. The new medication was working. He seemed more like himself, more comfortable. I took him for a walk around the block, let him sniff every tree and mailbox at his own pace. The credit card bill would arrive in 3 weeks. Minimum payment would be around $200, assuming I didn't charge anything else. My checking account showed $430. Rent was paid through the end of March, but April 1st was 3 days away. That night I looked at apartments in cheaper areas. Studio units in neighborhoods I wouldn't want to walk through alone at night. Places that didn't allow dogs. I closed the laptop and lay down on the couch. Murphy climbed up next to me, something he hadn't been able to do in weeks. The weight of him against my legs was comforting and terrible. The decision letter arrived on April 12th, 15 business days exactly. I knew what it was when I saw the envelope. Same government seal, same thin paper that made bad news feel somehow worse. After careful review of the evidence presented, the board has determined that the termination was justified under department policy. While we acknowledge that supervisory approval was obtained, the employee maintained independent responsibility for protocol compliance. The decision to close case 2024 CW 7843 did not meet the minimum threshold outlined in Section 4.7.2 of Department Guidelines. Appeal denied. I read it standing in the kitchen. Murphy was asleep on his bed in the corner, the good bed I'd bought him 3 years ago when his arthritis first started. The one that cost $120 because it was orthopedic and supposed to help with joint pain. I set the letter down and called Donald Kirby. He answered on the second ring. I got the decision. They denied it. I'm sorry. I was hoping they'd at least reduce it to a suspension. He paused. You have options. You can pursue legal action, file a lawsuit for wrongful termination. But I need to be honest with you about what that involves. Tell me. You'd need to hire an employment attorney. Most work on contingency, but they'll want to see a strong case before they take it on. The process typically takes 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer. And even if you win, the settlement might not cover your lost wages and legal costs. What are my chances of winning? Maybe 50-50. You have good documentation, but the department has broad discretion in personnel decisions. A lot depends on the judge and how they interpret the policy language. I looked at my bank statement pulled up on my phone. $640 in checking. $1,100 in savings. The credit card balance was $3,200 and climbing. Rent was due in 4 days, $1,200 I didn't have. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. Take your time. But be aware there are statutes of limitation on these claims. You'd need to file within 6 months of the termination date. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and made another list. This one was shorter. Income 0. Expenses $3,000 a month minimum, more with Murphy's treatment. Savings enough for maybe 2 weeks. Credit available $7,000 left on the card at 23% interest. I opened my laptop and searched for employment attorneys. The first 3 I called wanted retainer fees between $2,000 and $5,000. The fourth said she'd look at my case on contingency, but only after reviewing all my documentation. I sent her everything by email. She responded 2 days later. This is a challenging case. While your documentation is thorough, the board's decision gives them significant legal cover. I'd estimate a 40% chance of success in litigation, and the process would likely take at least a year. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can take this on contingency. If you'd like to pay a retainer, we could discuss it further. I didn't have a retainer. I barely had rent. Murphy's next appointment was on April 15th. Dr. Patterson did her examination and smiled when she saw how much better he was moving. The pain management protocol is working well. He's definitely more comfortable. How are you managing the costs? Fine, I lied. Good. We'll want to continue this regimen and monitor his blood work monthly. Just keep doing what you're doing. I charged the appointment to the credit card. $420. The card was now maxed at $10,000. I'd used it all in 6 weeks. That night I got an email from a staffing agency I'd applied to in March. They had a temporary position available. Administrative work for a county office, $15 an hour, 25 hours a week. It wasn't enough to live on, but it was something. I replied immediately. The interview was the next day, conducted by a tired-looking woman who barely glanced at my resume. "You're overqualified for this," she said. "Why do you want it?" "I'm in a transitional period professionally and need something flexible while I sort out my next career move." She nodded like she'd heard that before. "It's data entry mostly, some filing, answering phones. Pretty boring work for someone with your background." "I'm fine with boring right now." She hired me on the spot. Start date was April 22nd. I'd make about $1,500 a month before taxes. $1,200 after. Not enough for rent and Murphy and everything else, but better than nothing. I moved at the end of April. Found a studio apartment in a converted warehouse 30 minutes outside the city. $700 a month, utilities included, no lease required. The landlord looked at Murphy and shrugged. "No deposit for pets, but if he damages anything, you pay for it." The apartment was 400 square feet with a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet, and windows that looked out on a parking lot. The neighborhood was the kind where car alarms went off at night and people walked fast with their heads down. I signed the month-to-month agreement and moved in with what fit in my car. The job started on a Monday. I sat in a cubicle and entered data from paper forms into a computer system that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1995. The woman training me was maybe 22, bored. Explained everything in a monotone. "Just copy what's on the form into the fields. If something doesn't match or looks wrong, flag it and move on. Don't try to fix it yourself." I entered data for 8 hours. The fluorescent lights hummed. The air conditioning was too cold. At lunch I ate the sandwich I brought from home in my car, watching Murphy sleep in the back seat. I'd started bringing him to work, leaving him in the car with the windows cracked and a bowl of water. It wasn't ideal, but I couldn't afford doggy daycare and I didn't trust leaving him alone in the new apartment. The paychecks were deposited every 2 weeks. $600. I paid the rent, bought Murphy's medication, bought the cheapest groceries I could find. Ramen, eggs, bread, peanut butter. I lost weight. My clothes started hanging loose. I told myself it was fine, I needed to lose a few pounds anyway. Murphy's condition stabilized on the medication, but Dr. Patterson wanted to see him monthly. I started spacing the appointments out every 6 weeks instead of every 4. She noticed. "We really should keep him on the monthly monitoring schedule. His blood work needs to be watched closely with this medication protocol." "I understand. I'll try to get him in more regularly." I didn't. I couldn't afford it. In May, my car's check engine light turned into a more serious problem. The engine started overheating on my drive home from work. I pulled over and called a tow truck, watched $400 I didn't have disappear. The mechanic said it was the radiator, maybe the water pump, he'd need to look more closely. The estimate came back at $900. "I can't do that right now. Can you do a temporary fix?" He looked at me like I'd asked him to perform surgery with a butter knife. "Lady, temporary fixes on cooling systems don't exist. You drive this car without fixing it, you'll blow the engine. Then you're looking at $3,000 if the engine's even worth replacing." I had the car towed to the apartment and left it in the parking lot. Started taking the bus to work. 2 hours each way, 3 different transfers. I brought Murphy with me, carried him on and off the buses. He was patient about it, settled at my feet and slept. Other passengers stared. Nobody said anything. The credit card company started calling in June. I'd missed 2 payments. Couldn't afford even the minimum anymore. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. We need to set up a payment plan to bring your account current. You're currently 60 days past due with a balance of $10,247. The late fees and interest are going to keep accumulating until we receive payment. I'm working on it. I just need a little more time. I understand, but we need a commitment from you today. Can you pay at least the minimum payment this month? The minimum was $380. I had $200 in my checking account and rent was due in 3 days. I'll call you back. I hung up before she could respond. Murphy started limping again in late June. His back legs were getting worse. I'd been stretching the medication, giving him slightly smaller doses to make it last longer. It wasn't working anymore. He struggled to stand up in the mornings. Sometimes he couldn't make it outside fast enough and had accidents in the apartment. I cleaned them up without comment, helped him outside, sat with him while he did his business slowly and painfully. Dr. Patterson called me on July 3rd. Murphy missed his appointment last week. I wanted to check in and make sure everything's okay. We're fine. Just been busy with the new job. I'll reschedule soon. I'm concerned about him being off schedule with his monitoring. This medication can have side effects if we're not watching his blood work carefully. Can you come in this week? I'll try. I didn't try. I couldn't afford to try. The letter from my old landlord arrived in mid-July. I'd broken the lease when I moved out in April, owed 4 months of rent plus penalties. $4,800. They were taking me to collections. My credit score, already damaged from the missed credit card payments, dropped another 100 points. I stopped answering my phone. Creditors called constantly. The credit card company, the collection agency, the vet's office asking about unpaid bills I'd been putting off. I let it all go to voicemail, deleted the messages without listening. Work became the only stable thing. Show up, enter data, collect a paycheck. My supervisor noticed I was losing weight, asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, just stressed about personal stuff. She nodded and didn't push. Nobody there knew about my background, about DCFS or the termination or any of it. I was just another temp worker, nobody special, nobody worth paying attention to. Murphy had a crisis on July 18th. I woke up to him crying, a sound I'd never heard him make before. He was lying on his side, couldn't get up, his back legs completely unresponsive. I called an emergency vet. They said to bring him in immediately. I didn't have a car. I called a rideshare, waited 20 minutes while Murphy cried. The driver looked nervous when he saw me carrying a 60-pound dog. I'll pay extra for any cleaning needed, I said. Please. It's an emergency. He let us in. The ride cost $45. The emergency vet examined Murphy and took x-rays. The veterinarian was young, probably fresh out of school, trying to be gentle with the bad news. His spine is severely degraded. The medication was helping manage pain, but the underlying condition has progressed. At this point, we're looking at quality of life issues. He's in significant pain. Without immediate intervention, surgery possibly, he's not going to recover function in his back legs. How much is the surgery? Anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000, and that's if he's even a candidate. Given his age and overall condition, surgery might not be advisable. The recovery would be difficult. What are my other options? She paused, choosing her words carefully. We can increase his pain medication, keep him comfortable. But I need to be honest with you. He's suffering. The kindest thing at this point might be to consider letting him go peacefully. I looked at Murphy. He was lying on the examination table, panting, his eyes cloudy and tired. His tail moved slightly when he saw me looking at him. Still trying to wag, still trying to be a good dog. How long can I think about it? He shouldn't go home like this. He needs to either be admitted for pain management and observation, or we need to make the decision today. Admission would cost hundreds of dollars a day. I had $63 in my checking account. Can I have a few minutes alone with him? She left the room. I sat on the floor next to the examination table and put my hand on Murphy's head. His fur was gray around his muzzle now, had been for years. I'd gotten him from a shelter when I was in graduate school, barely making rent, eating rice and beans most nights. He'd been 2 years old then, full of energy, had helped me through comprehensive exams and thesis defense and the terrible first job that almost made me quit the field entirely. 12 years. He'd never asked me for anything except love and food and walks, and now I couldn't even afford to keep him comfortable. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe longer. The veterinarian came back eventually, her expression sympathetic. Have you made a decision? The words came out before I really understood what I was saying. I need to let him go. I can't afford the treatment, and I can't watch him suffer. She nodded, didn't make me feel worse about it. That's a very loving decision. It's clear you care about him very much. Would you like to be with him during the procedure? Yes. They brought in the equipment. Explained how it would work. 2 injections, the first to relax him, the second to stop his heart. It would be peaceful, painless. He wouldn't feel anything except maybe sleepy. I held Murphy's head while they gave him the first injection. His eyes started to close. I kept talking to him, telling him he was a good dog, the best dog, that I was sorry. The second injection went in. His breathing slowed, then stopped. The veterinarian checked for a heartbeat with her stethoscope. He's gone. I'm so sorry for your loss. I stayed with him for a few more minutes, my hand on his chest, feeling the absence of his heartbeat. Then I stood up and walked out of the room. The receptionist asked about cremation services. I said no, couldn't afford it. They'd handle the remains. I signed some papers and left. The rideshare back to my apartment cost $38. I sat in the back seat and stared out the window. The driver tried to make conversation once, asked if I'd had a good day. I didn't answer. He stopped trying. The apartment was empty without Murphy. His bed was still in the corner, his food and water bowls still on the floor. I sat on the edge of my mattress and looked at them. Tomorrow I'd need to get rid of his things, clean up, move on. Tonight I just sat there and tried to remember what it felt like to believe that doing the right thing mattered, that following protocol and documenting carefully and trusting the system would be enough. The belief wouldn't come. I wasn't sure it had ever really been there, or if I just told myself it was because the alternative was too frightening to accept. August arrived with heat that made the studio apartment unbearable. No air conditioning, just a box fan that pushed hot air around. I stopped sleeping well, lay awake most nights listening to sirens and arguments from neighboring units. Work was the only thing that had a schedule, a structure. Show up, enter data, leave. The routine kept me functional. The final notice from the collection agency came on August 14th. I owed them nearly $5,000 for the broken lease. If I didn't respond within 10 days, they'd pursue legal action. I put the letter in a drawer with the others. Credit card statements showing balances I'd never pay, medical bills for Murphy's treatment, past due notices for utilities I'd already moved away from. Evidence of everything falling apart, preserved in paper. My supervisor called me into her office on August 20th. She was holding a printout, something official looking. Her expression was apologetic. I need to talk to you about your background check. It's routine for temps who've been here more than 90 days. We run an employment verification. My stomach dropped. Okay. Your previous employer at DCFS indicated you were terminated for cause. That's not what you told us on your application. You said you left for personal reasons. I'm appealing that termination. I don't consider it valid. She set down the paper. I understand that's how you see it, but from an HR perspective, we can't keep someone on staff who misrepresented their employment history. I'm sorry. Today will be your last day. I cleaned out my cubicle in 15 minutes. There wasn't much. A coffee mug, some pens, a sweater I kept for when the air conditioning got too cold. The woman who trained me watched from her desk but didn't say anything. I walked out to the bus stop and waited 40 minutes for the next route home. The apartment was hot and empty. Murphy's bed was gone. I'd thrown it away the day after he died, couldn't stand looking at it. His bowls were still under the sink. I kept meaning to get rid of them but hadn't managed it yet. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and opened my banking app. $212 in checking. Nothing in savings. The rent was due in 11 days. $700 I didn't have and no way to get it. For the first time since the termination letter arrived back in January, I let myself cry. Not the careful, controlled tears I'd allowed myself a few times when things got bad, but the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper. The kind that recognizes you've lost everything and there's no path back to what you had before. I cried until my throat hurt and my eyes were swollen. Then I stopped, washed my face in the bathroom sink, and started thinking practically. I couldn't pay rent. I'd be evicted. I couldn't get another apartment without income, and with my destroyed credit. I couldn't stay with family because I didn't have family who'd take me in. My sister had her own problems. I had maybe 3 weeks before I was on the street. The next morning I walked to a social services office downtown. 2 hours on foot because I couldn't afford the bus. The waiting room was crowded, mostly women with children, a few elderly people, some men who looked like they'd been sleeping rough. I took a number and sat. 3 hours later a caseworker called my name. She was younger than me, probably doing the job I used to do, probably making the same salary I'd once made. The irony wasn't lost on me. What services are you seeking today? I need help with housing. I'm about to be evicted. I lost my job, can't make rent. She pulled up forms on her computer. Have you applied for unemployment benefits? I was denied. My previous termination was for cause. Are you currently employed? No. Do you have any income at all? No. She asked more questions. Medical conditions, disabilities, dependents, assets. No to everything. She typed in silence for a while, then looked up. You might qualify for emergency housing assistance, but there's a waiting list. Current wait time is 6 to 8 weeks. I can put your name on the list. I'll be evicted before then. If you're facing immediate homelessness, you can try the emergency shelters. I can give you a list of locations and phone numbers. Most operate on a first-come, first-served basis. You'd need to check in daily. She printed out the list. 15 shelter locations across the county. I folded the paper and left. I spent the next week applying for jobs, any jobs. Fast food, retail, warehouse work, anything that might hire immediately. Most applications asked about criminal history, employment gaps, reasons for leaving previous positions. I lied when I could, told the truth when I had to. Nobody called back. The eviction notice was taped to my door on September 1st. I had 5 days to vacate or the landlord would file with the court. I packed what I could fit in my car, which still sat in the parking lot with its broken radiator. Clothes, some books, my laptop, a few kitchen items. Everything else I left. On September 5th, I slept in my car for the first time. Parked in a grocery store lot that didn't chase people away at night. Locked the doors, reclined the seat as far as it would go, used my jacket as a blanket. It wasn't as bad as I'd feared. Uncomfortable but survivable. I woke up at dawn when security knocked on my window. "You can't sleep here. Need you to move along." I drove to a different parking lot, this one by a park. Used the public restroom to wash my face and brush my teeth. Changed clothes in a bathroom stall. Sat at a picnic table and updated my resume on my laptop, using the park's free Wi-Fi. The shelter system was worse than living in the car. I tried it once, standing in line for 2 hours to be told they were full for the night. The woman ahead of me in line said you had to get there by 4 in the afternoon to have a chance. I couldn't do that and also spend my days looking for work, using Wi-Fi, trying to maintain some appearance of normalcy. September became a routine. Sleep in the car, moving between parking lots to avoid attention. Use public restrooms and the gym I still had a membership to from before everything fell apart. The membership was $25 a month, charged to the maxed-out credit card that I'd stopped paying months ago. I kept expecting them to cancel it, but they didn't. I showered there, changed clothes, pretended I was just another person working out before heading to an office job. The job search was hopeless, but I kept trying. Submitted applications, followed up, rewrote my resume. A grocery store called me for an interview. The manager looked at my work history and seemed impressed. "You're way overqualified for stocking shelves. Why do you want this job?" I'd learned to navigate this question. I'm looking for stable work while I transition to a new field. I like the physical nature of the work, the clear expectations. I'm reliable and detail-oriented. Your last employer terminated you, though. Can you explain that? There was a disagreement about protocol interpretation. I followed proper procedure, but the department chose to interpret the guidelines differently. I've learned from that experience. He nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty. Let me talk to my district manager and I'll get back to you. He never got back to me. October brought rain. Sleeping in the car became harder. Everything was damp. My clothes started to smell no matter how carefully I washed them at the gym. I tried to mask it with cheap body spray from the dollar store, but I could tell people noticed. They moved away from me on buses, avoided standing too close in public restrooms. The gym canceled my membership on October 15th. Too many failed payment attempts on the credit card. I lost access to showers, lockers, the one place where I could maintain some dignity. I started using public restrooms exclusively, washing up in sinks, changing clothes in stalls while other women pretended not to notice. My phone service was disconnected on October 22nd. I'd been using it for job applications, emails, staying connected to anything that felt like normal life. Without it, I was cut off. I could still use Wi-Fi on my laptop, but only when I could find it. Libraries became my office, the place where I sat and pretended to be a person with purpose. A librarian approached me one afternoon in early November. She was older, kind-faced, the type who'd probably worked there for decades. "I've noticed you here quite a bit lately. Are you doing okay?" "I'm fine. Just between jobs right now, spending a lot of time on applications." She looked at me carefully, taking in details I'd stopped seeing. The clothes I'd been wearing for days. The way I'd lost weight, my face thinner and harder than it used to be. The laptop that was 4 years old and running slowly. "We have resources if you need them. Information about social services, job placement programs, housing assistance. I've tried those. There are waiting lists for everything. She nodded like she'd heard that before. The offer stands if you change your mind. And you're always welcome here during open hours. I spent Thanksgiving in the car, parked outside a church that was serving free meals. I didn't go in. Couldn't face the pity, the questions, the well-meaning volunteers who wanted to help. Instead, I ate a protein bar from the gas station and watched families arrive, dressed nicely, smiling. People who still believed the system worked if you just followed the rules. The car finally died in early December. I'd been nursing it along, barely driving except when I had to move parking lots. The engine made a grinding sound one morning and simply stopped. No warning, no gradual failure, just done. I had it towed to the nearest mechanic, already knowing I couldn't afford whatever was wrong. Engine seized, he said after looking at it for 10 minutes. From driving it with a bad radiator for too long. Not worth fixing. You're looking at a new engine, probably $4,000, and this car's not worth that. What are my options? Junk it. Maybe get $200 from a salvage yard. I took the $200. Used it to buy a sleeping bag rated for cold weather, and a backpack that could hold everything I still owned. The rest went to food. Real food, not just protein bars and vending machine snacks. One decent meal before things got worse. Living on the street was different than living in the car. More exposed, more vulnerable. I found a spot under an overpass where other people congregated at night. Nobody bothered me. We had an unspoken agreement to ignore each other, to pretend we weren't all in the same situation. A woman who slept near me started a conversation one night. She was maybe 50, had been homeless for 3 years. "You're new to this," she said. Not a question. Yes. You'll learn. It's about routines. Knowing where the safe places are when the shelters have food, which cops will hassle you and which ones leave you alone. How long does it take to learn? She laughed, a sound without humor. Depends on whether you're planning to get out or planning to survive. Getting out requires luck more than anything else. Surviving that you can learn pretty quick. Christmas came. The city put up lights downtown. Churches opened their doors for special meals. Volunteers handed out blankets and care packages. I accepted a blanket, turned down the care package. Someone else needed it more. On New Year's Eve, I sat under the overpass and thought about where I'd been a year ago. In my old apartment with Murphy, waiting for the appeal decision, still believing that documentation and procedure and following the rules would save me. Still believing the system was fundamentally fair, that good work would be recognized, that justice existed somewhere if you just knew how to access it. That person felt like a stranger now. Someone naive, someone who'd never really understood how precarious everything was. How quickly it could all disappear. How little protection, competence, or integrity or years of service provided when the system decided you were expendable. The woman from the overpass sat down next to me. "You okay?" "Just thinking." "Dangerous habit." She pulled out a flask, took a drink, offered it to me. I shook my head. "Suit yourself. Happy New Year, I guess." "Yeah, Happy New Year." We sat in silence, watching people walk past on their way to parties and celebrations. People with homes and jobs and futures that looked like something. People who still believed the world made sense. I pulled my sleeping bag tighter and closed my eyes. Tomorrow I'd wake up and do it again. Walk to the library, use the bathroom, maybe apply for a few more jobs that wouldn't call back. Eat whatever I could afford or find. Sleep under the overpass and hope it didn't rain. The routine would continue until something changed or it didn't. Either way, I'd survive it. That was all that was left now. Not thriving, not recovering, not rebuilding. Just surviving one day at a time, in a world that had proven itself indifferent to everything I'd once believed mattered. The fireworks started at midnight. Bright colors against the dark sky. People cheered somewhere in the distance. I watched them fade and pulled the sleeping bag over my head, blocking out the light and sound, retreating into the only space I still controlled.